Hi there, this is the Athletic Football Podcast weekend preview looking ahead to the very best of the Premier League and beyond. Hi there everyone, I'm Adam Leventhal and joining me this week is TIFO and Tactics man Jon Mackenzie. How are you?
Hello.
Are you good?
Yeah, good.
Excellent. Investigations and villain Joey D'Urso, how are you?
Very well, thank you.
Good to have you on the show once again. And what do I call you, Tim? What do I call you?
I don't know.
Bit of Spurs?
Nobody knows.
Wolf.
Anyway, it's good to have you on board once again, Tim. Good to see you. We're going to be talking about some massive title battles in both Spain and Germany. We've got the Asian Cup and AFCON finals as well to focus on. But the main thrust, as always, will be the Premier League. And it is a 7-2-1 fixture formation this week from Saturday through until Monday. Do you want to hear what the fixtures are in detail? Thank you, Tim. Good. Saturday, 12:30, Manchester City, second. They have a chance to go top against Everton, now in the drop zone. We've got 5 3 o'clocks on Saturday. A couple of mid-tablers. Wolves in 10th against Brentford in 15th. And then Fulham 13th against Bournemouth in 12th. We've got Spurs in 5th against Brighton in 8th. We'll talk about that in a bit. Then a bit of a basement scrap. Luton in 17th against bottom of the lot, Sheffield United, 10 points from safety. Liverpool, they may well be aiming to regain top spot by the time that they take on Burnley, who are second bottom and 7 adrift. Then the Saturday 5:30 is Nottingham Forest, who could be in the drop zone by the time they face Newcastle, who are in 9th. On Sunday, the 2 o'clock is West Ham. No wins in 6 for West Ham in all competitions against Arsenal in 3rd. West Ham, though, remember, aiming to do the double on Mikel Arteta's side. The Sunday 4:30 is Aston Villa. Only 1 win in 5 in all competitions against Manchester United, who've won 3 out of their last 5, including that 3-2 win against Aston Villa. And then the Monday night football is Crystal Palace in 14th. Roy Hodgson under increasing pressure against Chelsea. Mauricio Pochettino under slightly less pressure after beating Villa in midweek. And we are going to be starting at Villa Park. So let's focus on Aston Villa against Manchester United. That's Sunday 4:30. Villa 4th, 46 points. Man United 6th with 38 points. Contrasting form at the moment. Villa with just that 1 win in 5 in all competitions. They were beaten by Chelsea in the FA Cup this week. 2 wins out of 6 in the Premier League. Joey, it's not quite going as well as it was, is it?
No, it's not. And I think, you've got to caveat this with this is absolutely amazing times to support Villa. Emery has been incredible. I think the last calendar year was the best ever in terms of wins for Villa team, even in the modern era or potentially ever. So I don't want to be a moaner, but yesterday was pretty bad. The Chelsea result. Chelsea just cut through Villa so many times in that first half, went 2-0 up after 20 minutes. Really, really poor performance. And it's one of those really worrying performances that you can't really point to one player having a mare or a big mistake or a thing the manager tried that didn't quite work. It's just really bad across the board. That midfield of Kamara, Louise McGinn that have been fantastic all season offered nothing. Chelsea kept playing through them. The 2 centre-backs, Villa are really on, running on fumes at the back with, obviously, Tyrone Mings is out long-term. Pau Torres keeps getting injured, and Ezri Konsa, which is a really bad one, is out as well. So the 4th and 5th choice centre-backs, Diego Carlos and Clement Lenglet, did not play well. It could be a blessing in disguise because Villa are fighting on 2 fronts as it is, going for the Champions League and the Europa Conference League, which would be massive for Villa if they did win that. I'm still feeling pretty positive, but this Man United game is huge because there are 8 points between them at the moment, and Manchester United would obviously very much like to get in the Champions League places. If Villa won, it would be 11 points, pretty insurmountable. But if Man United win 5 points, then you'd start to get feeling pretty nervous about making the Champions League.
Yeah, it feels like a bit of a bridging fixture, this one, doesn't it, Tim?
What do you mean by that?
Well, that Manchester United can obviously bridge the gap a little bit closer, can just sort of force the issue, maybe get Villa looking over their shoulders a little bit more worriedly.
A bridging fixture. So how's that the TV boffins are going to dub it? I'm looking forward to it. The game at Old Trafford was really interesting, obviously, with United coming from 2-0 down to 3-2. A bit of naivety from Villa in that game, I thought. Watched the game last night. It's crazy. For Chelsea to go from by all accounts, their most disastrous performance of the season against Wolves at the weekend, booed off at half-time, full-time. Fans really turned. So credit to Pochettino, really, for turning that around. It says something about his man management skills, I think. But yeah, Villa, I don't know, it's a shame, really. It would have been Leeds at home in the next round. Yeah. And you fancy them as a decent cup team under Emery. But yeah, it felt like one of those one game too far kind of games. Obviously, they don't rotate as much as some of the teams around them. And that's becoming maybe a bit of an issue as the weeks drag on.
And obviously the home form was so formidable. And now they've lost against Chelsea, Newcastle. They failed to beat Sheffield United. Is there anything apart from those injury worries that you've mentioned and the squad being a little bit stretched that they've changed in any way that maybe they need to sort of get back to?
I mean, there's a few players. Diaby really hasn't been as good. He was sensational in his first few games. His form's really dropped off. Jacob Ramsey, who's a really important player, has been struggling with injuries, in and out of the squad. So yeah, I mean, a flip side of that is Leon Bailey, who many Villa fans had pretty much written off has been amazing. But I mean, if you'd offered most Villa fans this at the start of the season, they'd have bitten your hand off. But it is pretty concerning, particularly that home record of losing by 2 goals in 2 consecutive home games. It's not great.
In terms of the positives for Villa, and I think you're right to flag the fact that yes, exceeding expectations certainly this season. But John, Ollie Watkins is obviously still not necessarily pulling up trees at the moment. It's only 2 goals in his last 9 games, but he's someone that they look to for inspiration on a constant basis, and he's got some spark about him still, hasn't he?
Yeah, I've been doing quite a lot of work on strikers and finishing this season, particularly in the Premier League, and I think Ollie Watkins is quite an interesting case study. One of the strikers who's really stood out to me has been Richarlison, because Richarlison always takes basically 1 or 2 touch shots. He's got 34 in 35 non-headed shots, which are within 1 or 2 touches this season, which is incredible. It's like 97% of his shots are with 1 or 2 touches. Ollie Watkins, I think, is quite different stylistically from Richarlison, but I think what you get with Emery is, in the same way with Richarlison under Ange Postecoglou, the system is designed to get him getting these repeatable chances where he stays in the right places and the ball ends up at his feet. I think the same thing is true under Emery for Ollie Watkins, albeit in a quite different way. So Ollie Watkins obviously started out as a wide player at the beginning of his career, and he has that ability to pick the ball up and run through or run in behind. And I think Villa have been excellent this season and I think they're on record for having done this, trying to keep Ollie Watkins in between the width of the penalty area, getting into these sorts of situations where Villa are going to repeatedly produce chances, and he's getting in those areas and scoring. So yeah, I think he's a real beneficiary of the Unai Emery way. What you get with Emery is, this is the system. We all know what the system is. The system is designed to generate these high value chances in and around the box. And he's the sort of guy who's going to take them. So yeah, really, really fascinating to have watched all of his shots this season, and yeah, he looks really, really potent.
What would be a successful season for Villa this season, Joey?
Well, getting in the Champions League and winning the Europa Conference League would obviously be a huge success. I think the Conference League is absolutely massive for Villa, and obviously, I think fans of other clubs see it as a bit tin pot, potentially with good reason if you're a club that's used to competing in the Champions League, whatever else. But for a team that hasn't been in Europe for 15 years, hasn't won anything of note for 25 years, it would be absolutely huge. And you saw, West Ham last season, and yes, there's a huge financial disparity between Villa and the teams they're likely to come up against in the quarterfinals and the semi-finals. West Ham against Fiorentina. Fiorentina might be a glamorous name, but they've got a fraction of the budget of West Ham. So Villa should really be, favourites to win that competition. I think the biggest teams are like Lille, Eintracht Frankfurt, and Villa should be favourites against any of those teams. So they've got a really good chance of winning silverware, which would be an amazing thing. And obviously, Champions League would be incredible as well. I think the accountants of Villa would very much take the Champions League over the Conference League, but fans maybe the opposite.
Let's talk about Manchester United, Tim. And I think it's only fair that when we've been talking about the pressure that Erik ten Hag's been under, the fact that maybe he's not the best communicator, maybe he's making errors in the recent past, to reflect on the fact that he's actually got them back on track. A couple of good victories against Wolves, against West Ham, 3 wins out of 5. That comeback win that you mentioned against Aston Villa started this run. Do you see this as being a sustainable push now for the top 4, 5?
I don't know. Maybe you can never tell with United. There's always some.
But can you tell a bit more about United
at
the moment?
There are green shoots coming through, and there's the bones of a good team in the short and long term, perhaps there. You look at that front three, the past few games. I mean, I watched them against West Ham last week, fully expecting Moisey to win his first one at Old Trafford. But and to be fair, West Ham had a lot of the game, much more than I was expecting. It was 22 shots to 12. But United were clinical. And that front three, Rashford, Garnacho and Højlund, who's in form. There's a real sort of pattern of strikers who were woefully out of form at the start of the season, like Richarlison, Matheus Cunha at Wolves, and Højlund, who are all prolific now, having gone through very long barren spells. It's good to see with Højlund because I think he's a likeable guy, and he's got an awful lot of attributes and an awful lot of pressure on his shoulders, some of which was unfair and related to his price tag. But he's they're playing some good football. They're putting out a decent 11 at the moment with Mainu and Fernandes and Casemiro as a midfield trio working pretty effectively. The problem is the defence, really. I mean, that they were so naive in the Wolves game last week when they sort of left 3-on-3 at the back when they were 3-2 up with 5 minutes of stoppage time. I couldn't believe what I was seeing, really. And obviously they conceded sloppy goals against Newport, against Spurs recently as well. So they had Lisandro Martinez back last weekend, his first appearance at Old Trafford since September. And obviously Luke Shaw's back as well, and you're thinking like they've finally got a settled 11. And then Martinez suffers a really bad knee injury and potentially out for the rest of the season. I haven't heard an update on that this week, but it looked pretty bad. So you can never tell with United, but this is probably the type of game that will suit them with the form that they're in. And I quite fancy them this weekend. But don't listen to me because I can't predict a football match, as we might discuss later.
We shall see. Do the youngsters at United? I mean, Tim mentioned there that it's going well now, but they are starting to sort of build a team for maybe the next few years with some of the exciting youngsters that they've got. Who excites you the most?
Yeah, I mean, they've been bailed out by their youngsters in recent games, right? And I think they've got the three that were sat on the hoardings at the side of the pitch after, I think, the second goal from Garnacho. So that's Garnacho, Højlund and Mainu as well. An interesting question, like which one of those has the highest ceiling? It's difficult to sort of say, I think, because they're obviously all in different positions. I think if Højlund, consistently becomes a 20 non-penalty goal a season striker, you have to argue and I think that's well within the grasp of his possibility. You have to sort of argue that would put him as maybe having the highest ceiling of the three, despite the fact that I think both of the other two are incredibly elite players already. Kobbie Mainu, only 18 years old, so still has a little bit of development to do. So maybe with him, I would be a little bit more circumspect on what his ceiling could be. But with Garnacho, I think is interesting because I feel as though he's the one who potentially has the highest ceiling, but also maybe the lowest floor. I think in terms of what he offers to Manchester United, he is incredible in these sorts of transitional games that they're playing. Has been really good on both sides of the field, so he can play instead of Rashford or with him as well. But I have questions about whether or not he will develop the ability to break down blocks, which will at some point, if Manchester United do improve, will become an issue. But I think it's well within his possibility to be able to do that. I think if he does, then he could be one of the best players in the Premier League in his career span. And Kobbie Mainu as well. Like, you watch him playing, and he's I think the best defensive midfielder Manchester United have at the moment, or pivot midfielder, which is, they've got Casemiro. He's one of the best in that position of all time. Obviously, he's declined a little bit, but with all three of them, I think they all have the potential to be world class. So it's kind of hard to put who's got the highest ceiling on them. But I probably tend slightly more towards Højlund just because of the goal scoring side of things. If you can score that amount of goals in the Premier League, you don't need to be a super well-rounded player. You just need to put the ball in the back of the net, whereas the other two are in positions where they do need to be a bit more well-rounded, I think, to really nail themselves to that mast of being a true Premier League great.
Let's get your predictions for this game. Aston Villa against Manchester United. Tim?
I think
try and base it on something that's going around in your mind that makes sense.
Uh-oh.
Just try.
Uh-oh. I think where I'm going wrong is I always try and predict what I want to happen.
Don't do that. Do what you think might actually happen based on facts and knowledge.
So maybe I'll go for a Man United win then.
Okay.
2-1.
2-1. Joey?
I think it was Emery's first game was a 3-1 win at Villa Park over Man United. That was the first time that Villa had beaten Man United at home since something like 1995. Why not the same again? 3-1 Villa.
Okay, and John?
I don't know. I think it's. I think Man United aren't very consistent, and they can win games 3-0 against West Ham, but they did that with 0.7 xG. They scored 3 from 0.7. And look, xG isn't everything. I know I talk about underlying numbers a lot. There's reasons why you can finish clinically for 3 times in one game, and it's not that insane, especially when you are a team like Man United, who, as we've just talked about, they have 3 players in their team who we're describing as potentially world class at under the age of 20, 21. But yeah,
just 2 numbers.
They
John.
score the first.
They
score the first goal and they win 3-0. They
concede
the first goal, and that could have been a completely different game, right? And so it's very hard to predict what will happen.
But I'm asking you for a prediction.
You are.
I love how you finished that answer by just not predicting a result at all.
Well, I was going to, but then he threw me off. You see, he started demanding hard figures. I'm going to go with the draw. 2-2.
2-2 draw.
Yeah.
Thank you. Next, let's check in with the champions. So kicking off the weekend, Saturday 12:30, Manchester City against Everton. Man City, 9 wins in a row in all competitions. They've won their last 5 in the Premier League. They've had a nice run though. Everton, Sheffield United, Newcastle, Burnley and Brentford all reaping 3 points. We don't see Everton stopping them this weekend, do we, Tim?
It's hard to make a case for them or Sean Dyche, whose record against Man City, you see the Burnley Man City numbers were flashed up last week with aggregate score of 51 or whatever over the last. Yeah, most of that was Sean Dyche, and he's only beaten City once in his career. They're his worst team to play against, basically. According to Transfermarkt, his points per game record against Man City is 0.26. That's 1 win, 2 draws in 19.
That's going to be similar to a lot of teams, though, isn't it?
Yeah, but then his next worst is 0.5, so it's half as bad as against anyone else.
You did ask him if he thought they were going to win, and you say no. Seems fair
enough.
I
know,
to
but I don't want to sort of beat down Sean Dyche on his bad record against Man City when so many other teams have bad records against Man City.
But it's just unbelievably bad. No,
that's fine. If it's particularly bad, then it is worth.
Yeah, particularly against Guardiola. That one win came against Pellegrini a long time ago, sort of 2015, as did one of the other draws. So otherwise, it's 1 draw in 17. And no, the way that Everton are playing, I mean, they diced Spurs a bit last week with set pieces and scored 2 goals from a yard out apiece. But I can't see them doing that to City, particularly at the Etihad and the form that City are in. It's really hard to make a case, to be honest.
John, can you make a case for Everton? I mean, Tim mentioning the set pieces, is that their only weapon when they're taking on City?
I think Man City have been a little bit shaky in certain defensive phases this season, which hasn't been talked about that much. And it's easy to look at their games and the numbers and say, I mean, the Brentford example is great, right? In the midweek, it's just they had 1 chance and scored it, but it came from a pretty catastrophic defensive error. And this season, it feels as though City have gone from being the best team out of possession amongst the elite teams to becoming very average. And a big part of their relative decline this season, I would say, has come off the back of that defensive shakiness. So a lot of people were saying, City are going to get Kevin De Bruyne back and everything's going to be fixed. And I, on the one hand, yes, they're going to score a lot more goals and they're going to be able to break teams down a lot, as we saw against Brentford as well with De Bruyne in the team. But I also think that they're only going to roll to the title like they do if they sort out the defensive frailties as well. And I think this season, Everton, we talk about Dyche ball, but what we've seen from Everton this season is very different from what we expect from Dyche usually. He's become a much more gregarious attacking coach, I would say, in his time at Everton. And they're set up to be very transitional, hit on the break, and I think City are weakest in those kind of scenarios. So if they can grab a goal in the way that Brentford did and then find a way of holding on, then I think there is a way for them to do it. But as Tim says, you're more likely to lose doing that than you are to win, which is why Dyche has the record he has.
Yeah, especially with Calvert-Lewin, I think it's 3 in 19 that he scored, and Doucouré's out. I mean, we were saying last week about what a sort of a one-man team they are. Yeah, still missing, and in terms of those transitions and being clinical and taking a snapshot or a header in the box, he's the man for that, really. So, yeah, not going to win.
No, it doesn't sound that way. And also because Man City in particular have one player. I mean, they've got so many players, but one player in Phil Foden who's in great form, and the return of Kevin De Bruyne seems to have, I don't know, maybe just raised him up even higher. We saw him against Brentford scoring that hat-trick, and he's just a joy to watch at the moment, isn't he?
Yeah, I watched that game, the Brentford game. He was absolutely brilliant. He's a funny one, Phil Foden, because I think because he was so good so early, you almost forget how good he is. People were talking about him when he was 18. When particularly with the combination of De Bruyne, it's absolutely some of the most exciting players to watch in the league. But still sort of struggling to get into the England squad, into the England starting lineup, which seems crazy given the form he's in. But I don't see Everton getting anything out of that.
Let's jump out of the sort of the Premier League side of things and looking ahead to the Euros. Tim, is he must start for England?
I mean, Southgate hasn't thought that way in the past, but there is an open slot at left forward for England. Sterling has been the man in the past and is no longer. I think he might have forced his way in had he continued his form of sort of early months of the season, but it seems like he's tailed off, and there's obviously something going on between him and Southgate. So there have been a few contenders to sort of just take Sterling's spot. Rashford, who as we know has been very inconsistent. Grealish, who's sort of on the back burner this season, injury issues and form issues. He's tried Maddison there a few times, but that's playing him out of position for me. I think Maddison is your backup to Bellingham, and he's probably the most unlucky one that's going to miss out on the team. So yeah, Foden, if fit and playing as he is, left forward isn't his best position either, I don't think. But I think that's where he'll play, and I think that's where he'll start for England. It'll be him, Saka on the right, and Kane up front. If the tournament was tomorrow, that's how you'd start.
Quick predictions for Manchester City against Everton. John, a score?
3-1.
3-1 City. Only 3-1?
Yeah.
Okay. Joey?
1-0 City.
Oh.
Just thought I'd mix things up a bit.
And Tim?
4-0.
4-0. Brilliant. Thank you very much. Let's just cast an eye on our two North London clubs next. Right, so let's deal with Tottenham and Arsenal. First, Tottenham up against Brighton. Son is going to be back for Spurs, is he, Tim?
Yeah, but given all the emotional and physical exertions of the Asian Cup in the past few weeks, I don't know if he's an automatic starter, particularly given late coming back, not training with the squad for a while, and Spurs are pretty good up front at the moment. So it's Werner, it's Richarlison, pretty much the most informed striker in the Premier League, and then sort of Kulusevski or Johnson on the right. So yeah, maybe you're coming for Werner, but then it's pretty rare that Son's on the bench. You don't really see it that often. Yeah. So I guess they'll see what state he's in, to be honest. He played a lot. They had a couple of extra time games, lots of late exertions, late goals out in the Asian Cup, and on Tuesday they lost in the semis to Jordan. So he's back anyway.
Well, no, but it's interesting because you'd think in previous years, all right, Son's back. We've got to get him straight back. So it's a reminder that Ange Postecoglou has sort of nurtured that Spurs team, and they're playing and not having to rely on, obviously Kane has gone, Son has gone, so it just shows a bit of an evolution, doesn't it?
Yeah, it speaks to the strength and depth. It speaks to the form of the front players at the moment. I guess as soon as he's captain and their talisman, I'm talking myself into him starting.
He'll probably start. Won't he? He'll probably start, but we shall see. But he doesn't have to start. They're not desperate for him. Interesting that we saw a 4-2 victory for Brighton in the reverse game. Hopefully this will be a festival of football with more goals once again, and the statistics point towards that with Spurs. I think only 1 clean sheet since October. Brighton only 2 clean sheets all season. A nice dovetailing of styles, this, or a clash?
Yeah, I think the reason why both teams are not getting clean sheets are quite different. I think Spurs, everyone's talking at the moment about Spurs not having the ability to control games. Postecoglou has them playing this really exciting, flamboyant, direct football where you're constantly attacking. The problem is when you're going goals up, you do have to be able to control the game without having to constantly try and attack, right? It's much easier to retain possession when you're not constantly trying to put the ball in the opposition's net. And I think that has led to Spurs maybe dropping points a few times more recently, or looking like they struggle. So even the Brentford game, like there was a period where I think it was a very short period where they scored their 3 goals in that game, and in the first half they looked like they couldn't control the game at all. Same with Everton. As the game drew on, Everton were just sort of squeezing, and yes, they got the goal from a set piece, but there was plenty of chances before that, I think, where they could have nicked one as well. So with Spurs, the question is, how do you control the game in the moments where you're not trying to score? How do you stop the opposition from having the ball? Because if you're constantly attacking, you can often give the ball back to the opposition. They can then attack you. Whereas Brighton have no problems with control at all. I'd say they're very, very good in their low build-up phase. They do that Beatty stuff where they just play it around the back and try and find these outlets to move the ball. But where they've been struggling this season is in defensive transition, because they've lost Alexis McAllister, they've lost Moises Caicedo, two very elite centre midfielders, because not only can they do the technical build-up stuff, they can also defend in transition, which they often have to do for Brighton. They've now got Billy Gilmore and someone else in that central midfield, offering a lot less resistance when the opposition win the ball back and then transition back towards you. So, yeah, I think this one is going to be fascinating, because Spurs are going to cause Brighton problems in transition. Brighton are probably going to control the game. So, I think a festival of football is how I would describe it. But then my proclivities are, unique. So maybe the rest of the world won't find that. But I think there'll be a lot of chances, which is what people like, don't they?
Well, you get excited over a really tedious 0-0. Don't you? So that's
I think that's a common misconception. I don't necessarily enjoy a 0-0.
No, okay,
no, not
fine.
really. No, I like a goal. I don't like goals when it's like bad defending that leads to a goal. But if a goal is well worked, I'm not going to be like, I'm not Liam Tharm. Liam Tharm hates when
goals.
Teams don't. Yeah, he hates goals and when teams don't keep clean sheets. Whereas for me, I'm like, I don't care as long as you win.
Yeah,
winning is the important thing.
We want goals, don't we?
Do want
just
goals.
a quick one to you, Tim, if I may. And it's a bit of a random one. Obviously, Jurgen Klopp leaving Liverpool at the end of the season. Roberto De Zerbi and Ange Postecoglou sort of been mentioned in the conversation about who might potentially go in at Liverpool. And I think we're all thinking that it's going to be Xabi Alonso from Bayer Leverkusen anyway. But do you see this as a sort of a battle in some way between two likely candidates or not?
That's hard to answer unless we know what Liverpool are looking for in their next head coach, because De Zerbi and Ange Postecoglou play the same football wherever they go. So that's what Liverpool would have to want from their next manager, basically. And the fact that Klopp's coaching staff are all leaving at the same time suggests they might be looking for something different, in my opinion. Pep Lijnders is off, and the official word was that he wants to go and pursue his managerial career. Liverpool clearly don't think that he's the man for them. So, I don't know. There's a lot up in the air about it. I don't think Xabi Alonso's a shoe-in for it, and I think there are some reasons why it shouldn't be him. And just the fact that he last played for Liverpool in 2009 and has some kind of emotional tie. I think it's an awful way to conduct business. Do you know what I mean?
Because he's shown he's a really good manager.
Yeah, in half a season.
Well, not only half a season.
No, but if you're going in to build on a dynasty, almost, which is what Klopp has built, you need a bit more evidence than that. And if he'd played for Man City instead of Liverpool back in the 2000s, would we even be talking about him? So I get it. It's Liverpool, and they do have emotional ties to certain players, and they like the continuation of knowing the club. And maybe it is important. I'm not in and around Liverpool, so I don't know. But yeah, I think it's probably been proven in the past that if you just go for a former player, not necessarily destined to work.
Yeah. Okay.
Who was the last big manager who was a former player who really
Guardiola at Barcelona, who's quite good.
I guess so. Yeah.
There's a lot of more
He's
failures.
been pretty
there.
good at other places where he
Yeah.
wasn't as well, right? I guess.
It's the kind of exception that proves the rule, isn't it? Yeah.
Let's get a quick prediction on Spurs Brighton. Tim?
I think I agree with John. I think it's a shame it's not on telly, because that and Villa Man United are the two games I'd really want to watch this weekend. So yeah, I think Spurs will win 3-1.
Joey?
I'll go 2-2.
John?
I'll go Brighton 2-1.
Brighton 2-1. Okay,
Yeah.
Good, interesting. And I wanted to just have a quick word about Arsenal at West Ham on Sunday. They've won 3 on the bounce after it was looking pretty dicey for them. Big win against Liverpool, obviously criticism about how they celebrated and all that jazz. But it's got them back into the title race proper now, hasn't it?
I think so, yeah. The title race this season is funny, right? Because we're so used to City just being miles ahead at this point, or starting to grind at this point. And I don't think we're quite there yet. As I said before, like maybe City will start to roll, but I want to see evidence that that's going to happen before I say, okay, it's happened. And the result of that is that it's meant that Liverpool and Arsenal are in the title race by hook or by crook. And with Liverpool and Arsenal, you have 2 very different teams. I think with Arsenal, a team who are very much defence first, with elite players who can score. They stay in games long enough and get their goals. Whereas at Liverpool, it feels as though they're blowing a lot of teams away lower down the table. And maybe coming up against a team like Arsenal in that game, they struggle a bit more. So I think it's like the title challenge is really nicely set, because there's no absolutes in it at this point, and I wouldn't like to call it either way. But yeah, definitely Arsenal, definitely right up there, precisely because they can just stop teams from scoring. And yeah, you need to score yourself, but if you can be as strong as they are out of possession, it's just very, very hard for teams to actually turn them over. So.
And it's interesting that West Ham haven't won since they won at the Emirates 2-0, which was quite a surprise result. 4 draws in that time in all competitions, but they lost against Bristol City. They lost last time out against Manchester United. They're still 7th. Are they still dangerous, or are they just sort of, I don't know, waiting to drop or waiting to catch light? I can't quite pick them at the moment.
They don't strike me as dangerous in many ways. I think Moyes has done a good, consistent job to get them where they are, but they're not a particularly exciting team to watch. Calvin Phillips is not. Yeah, he came on at Old Trafford last week, and 10 minutes after he came on, he gave the ball away, which almost directly led to their 3rd goal. So that's 2 appearances and 2 times he's given the ball away for a goal, which isn't great. And yeah, they played some decent football against United, but they were just sort of powder puff in attack, really. If Kudus and Bowen aren't scoring the goals, I don't know who does, really. So yeah, a few. They don't particularly get my juices going, Adam, to be honest.
Okay, fair enough.
That Arsenal West Ham game at the Emirates was a really weird one. It finished 2-0 to West Ham, but Arsenal had 30 shots and 2-point XG and didn't score. So that was a real sort of freak result. So it doesn't necessarily show that West Ham are going to go and do a job on them at the return fixture.
Won twice right now this season against Arsenal, right? West Ham, they won in the cup too. Yeah, so it's clearly becoming a bit of a bogey team for them. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they play it out. But
that said, what's the score going to be?
Oh yeah, Arsenal win 2-0.
Arsenal will win 2-0.
I'll go 3-0.
I'll go 1-0.
Okay, thank you very much. Should we go around the world? So, yes, let's depart from the Premier League and some really juicy fixtures in both Spain and Germany. Where would you like to start, John? Spain or Germany?
I don't mind. Let's start Spain.
Spain. So, Real Madrid up against Girona. Real Madrid atop, 58 points. Girona second. Girona have only lost once all season, and that was against Real Madrid. Which way is this one going, do you think, John?
It's hard to say. The Girona have been fantastic this season, and there's a lot of people saying, could they do it? They've already lost to Real Madrid, as you say, and they're still in the title race, and they've managed to pull it out of the bag a few times, and they've kept neck and neck with Real Madrid the whole season. And look, Real Madrid aren't necessarily hugely convincing at the moment. They are having to pull things out of the bag themselves. But yeah, fantastic to watch. Would recommend, if you get the chance, to watch Girona play, because just really, really fantastic team. They have some really nice players. They had an incredible transfer window. They brought in a number of players. So players like Daley Blind and Erik Garcia from Barcelona, players who maybe people thought weren't ever going to make it. Or obviously Daley Blind had made it, but was coming to the end of his career. So they brought in a few sort of misfits and fit them in. They've got some City Football Group rejects as well. I don't know if we can call them rejects, but in players like Alex Garcia, and we've also got players like Savio, who are from within the City Football Group. It's just been announced this week that he's moving to Manchester City next season. So the real mismatch of bringing in all of these different types of players. But what I love about them is they have so much flexibility. They just have players. They can play with the back three. They can play with the back four. They have really creative ways of being able to build up. They're very, again, flamboyant. They love just carrying the ball forward. They have like really advanced inverting fullbacks in the same way that Spurs do, particularly in Mikel Gutierrez, who's a fantastic player. And they're just they just go out to score goals, and quite often they do. And all of this is against the background of the fact that they were only promoted the season before, so they had one season of staying in the league, and now they're taking on the title challenge. And Mikel, their coach, has had a history of taking teams up from the Segunda to the La Liga full, but then immediately them going down. This is the first time he's kept a team up, and then rather than going the other way, they've headed straight on up to this title challenge. So very, very exciting football, very, very exciting players, and if they win this game, the title challenge is still on. And I think there's a lot of people who want to believe that the big teams don't win every league every year, and it would be great to see them do it.
It's also tight in Germany. We mentioned Xabi Alonso a few moments ago. He is the manager of Bayer Leverkusen. They're top, 52 points. Bayern Munich are second with 50 points. And amazingly, Leverkusen are unbeaten this season. And it was interesting as well. They beat Stuttgart in the German Cup in midweek, played a full-strength side. It was almost like, come on, go out there, show me what you've got, and then you can play against Bayern Munich this weekend. It was a sort of a bold approach, and it may well reap rewards.
Yeah, this is a really interesting title challenge, I think, because Bayer Leverkusen are very different to Girona insofar as they're one of the biggest clubs in Germany, at least per the finances as well. But they have this whole what's the word?
Neverkusen.
Yeah, Neverkusen. But what is it when you're like you have so many expectations of you and you never? The word for that is what they are.
Flatter to deceive.
I think more that they just never quite hit the level that people expect of them. But what we've started seeing under Xabi Alonso is that they are now doing that. So Xabi Alonso joined the season prior and had a sort of middling season with them, never really quite clicked for them. And then again, they had a really great transfer window. They brought in a few players they really needed. So they brought in Alex Grimaldo, who was from Benfica, but they now play him as a left wing back. They brought in Jonas Hoffmann, who no one expected, another sort of end of career player who has unlocked Jeremy Frimpong. They brought in Victor Boniface, and they brought in Granit Xhaka as well. And those players have just filled the needs that they had in their squad. And yeah, this season they just look absolutely great. Really, really nice approach to football, because they do all of the sort of patient build-up that you expect from possession teams. But what they then do is they get into these scenarios where they can change the tempo really quickly, pass the ball, one-touch passing through channels of players, and then generate really exciting goals in that way as well. And they're the better team out of, I would say, Leverkusen and Bayern this season, which is pretty unusual, not least because Bayern have all of the stars, particularly in the front of their team. And Bayern are getting through by relying on Harry Kane or relying on Leroy Sané and Jamal Musiala as well. But with Leverkusen, they're such a coherent team that they're just consistently getting wins. And so if Leverkusen can hold on for this game, even just a draw, I think would make it really much a title challenge in their favour. They are missing a few players. They've had a few players away at AFCON, and they've got a few injuries as well. So it will be interesting to see how they shape up at the weekend. But really hoping that this one comes through for them, because I think that would put them in pole position for the league.
A lot of focus, obviously, for Bayern Munich will be on Harry Kane. If you haven't been following his form, he is in wonderful goal-scoring form, 24 in 20, and he's actually chasing Robert Lewandowski's all-time Bundesliga goal-scoring record of 41. Two great games in both Spain and Germany, meetings of the top two, and we'll have continued coverage on The Athletic with our team of writers, respectively, in Spain and Germany. Let's talk about the international finals as well. I'm going to cross over to our Asian Cup correspondent, Tim Spiers. You were talking about Son earlier on. Obviously, people were expecting South Korea to make the final, but they lost against Jordan, and they're taking on the hosts, Qatar. Saturday, 3:00. Are you going to be watching?
Yeah, I might do. Well, I've got a Triller TV subscription.
Have you? You know what? I was doing the daily football briefing the other day, and I was looking at the, we tell people where the games are going to be on, and I saw Triller TV. I genuinely had not a clue what it was, and I didn't even mention it because I didn't know what it was at all.
I think it's predominantly either wrestling or UFC, something that isn't a proper sport.
Not my bag, really.
But yeah, no, I'm signed up to the 7-day free trial.
Are
so
you?
I could watch the semis, so maybe I'll watch the final as well.
Yeah,
the semi I watched in the week was amazing. Jordan against South Korea. A real sort of David versus Goliath clash. Jordan had never beaten South Korea. And not only did they beat them, they beat them 2-0. South Korea didn't have a single shot on target, which is the first time that's ever happened to them in the competition's history. And Jurgen Klinsmann utterly humiliated, really, and lambasted back home for a variety of reasons. So they're the sort of big story in that they really should have won this tournament for the first time since 1960, with all the other favourites having departed the competition. But the fairy tale side of it is Jordan, who've never reached a semi-final in their history. They're managed by Moroccan Hussein Amouta, and it sort of they remind me of Morocco's run to the semis of the World Cup. Actually, they're extremely disciplined, very aggressive press. They've only got one player who plays in Europe, Moussa El Tamari, plays for Montpellier, got a goal and assist the other day. And they play Qatar in the final. Qatar are the hosts. They won it last time. So they're looking for their second Asian Cup in a row, which is quite surprising, but I guess they've had a lot of investment in the past few years, around the World Cup. And it'll be an incredible atmosphere. Jordan's not too far away, and there was an extremely partisan crowd for the semi-final in midweek. It'll be worth watching for sure. On Triller TV.
On Triller TV, we're giving them free publicity. Obviously, then you also have the AFCON final, which is on Sunday at 8:00. Nigeria up against Ivory Coast, the hosts. Nigeria, I think, have just sort of steadily made their way to the final. Ivory Coast has been just drama all the way. It's going to be a great final, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I watched the Nigeria-South Africa game yesterday. It was an amazing game. I mean,
the conclusion of it was amazing, wasn't it?
Yeah. So Nigeria, obviously massive favourites. Victor Osimhen, a bunch of Premier League players. South Africa, not household names in there at all. But they started really well. They had some good chances in the first half. Nigeria went 1-0 up, and then it was at the 88th minute. Victor Osimhen scores, and you think, okay, 2-0. That's the kind of result you expect. They're all celebrating. All their fans are going crazy, and then you sort of see that the referee has flagged something that I didn't see in real time. A penalty to South Africa. Which they then scored, and then very nearly scored a winner in the last minute. And then there was a red card to South Africa later on. Nigeria won the shootout. Iheanacho scored the winning penalty. So it was high drama. Ivory Coast game a bit less dramatic. A sort of fluky goal which bounced off the floor and over the keeper from Sebastian Haller. It's obviously a great story there because he was very ill. But yeah, very exciting final. Nigeria, the sort of team that lots of other African teams love to beat, and then the hosts in Ivory Coast. So yeah, very excited about that.
Obviously, there are bigger things about Nigeria that make them interesting. But the one thing that I do like about them is that William Troost-Ekong, their captain, central defender, takes their pens. It always looks a bit odd, but he always does well. He does well.
Former Watford?
Former Watford, Former Watford.
So they've got nice kits as well, Nigeria. I thought the kit's lovely.
Yeah, traditionally they've always had snazzy kits, haven't they? Yeah. Nigeria. Right, well that is it. Oh, and by the way, there is an in-depth episode of the Athletic Football Podcast talking about this AFCON, which has been a great tournament, and you can check that one out with Io and Jay Harris, and Sol Bamba also are on that podcast, and I pop up as well, talking about Samuel Eto'o and some of the more unsavoury headlines that have come out of this AFCON as well. Tim, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks, Adam.
Joey, thank you.
Thanks.
Oh dear. John, thank you to you as well.
It's been a pleasure.
As always. Thank you very much for listening. Io's going to be back on Monday, and we will be back with another weekend preview next week. Thank you very much for listening.
If you like this video, click subscribe for more content like this. We'll be joined by the likes of David Ornstein, Matt Slater, Adam Crafton, Carl Anker, and plenty more through the season to bring you the inside track to the biggest stories in football. If you'd like to listen to the full episodes for free, search the Athletic Football Podcast wherever you get your podcasts from.